My mother, Victoria Harrison, built Harrison Luxury Hotels from a single boutique property into a chain of 17 high-end hotels across the East Coast. She was featured in Forbes, interviewed on CNBC, invited to speak at hospitality conferences. She was a self-made success story and she never let anyone forget it. Especially not me. I was 32, the middle child of 3 daughters, and according to family consensus, the disappointment. My older sister Diane was Harrison Hotels' VP of Marketing, commanding a 6-figure salary and company Mercedes. My younger sister Beth managed 3 of the flagship properties, living in penthouse suites and wearing Chanel to work. I was a remote software contractor. I worked from a small 2-bedroom house in a decent but not luxurious suburb, drove a practical Subaru and wore hoodies to my home office. To my mother's carefully curated world of luxury and status, I was an embarrassment. "This is Catherine," she'd introduce me at family events, her voice always carrying a note of apology. "She does something with computers." Not "she's a senior systems architect." Not "she specializes in financial software infrastructure." Just "something with computers," delivered with the same tone she might use to say, "She collects trash for a living." The truth was more complex, but I'd learned years ago that my mother didn't want complex. She wanted simple narratives. Diane was the marketing genius. Beth was the hospitality prodigy. And I was the one who'd chosen wrong, walked away from the family business and settled for middle-class mediocrity. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd walked away from Harrison Hotels at 23 with $100,000 in savings from working summers and holidays since I was 16. I'd invested every penny in cryptocurrency in 2013, back when Bitcoin was $100 and everyone thought it was a scam. By 2017 my portfolio was worth $8 million. I'd diversified immediately. Sold 70% of my crypto holdings, invested in index funds, tech stocks, real estate investment trusts. I'd continued working as a contractor because I genuinely enjoyed coding, but my real full-time job was managing my investment portfolio. By 28 I had $34 million. By 30 I had $89 million. And then I'd done something that would have horrified my mother if she'd known about it. I'd started buying shares in Harrison Luxury Hotels. Mom had taken the company public 6 years ago to fund expansion. She'd retained 32% ownership, Diane had 8%, Beth had 5%. The remaining 55% was distributed among institutional investors, private equity firms and public shareholders. I'd spent 2 years quietly accumulating that 55%. Through shell corporations, investment vehicles and offshore entities. All completely legal, all properly documented, I'd purchased controlling interest in my mother's empire. I'd spent $187 million total, leveraging some positions, using options strategies, making calculated moves through my investment advisor, Robert Chin at Apex Capital Management. Now I own 61% of Harrison Luxury Hotels. My mother owned 32%. I was her majority shareholder, her boss in every meaningful sense. And she had absolutely no idea. The company had done well under my silent ownership. I'd attended board meetings via proxy, voted through Robert, guided strategy decisions from behind the corporate veil. Revenue had grown from $340 million to $520 million annually. Stock price had increased 34%. We'd opened 4 new properties. But Mom's ego had grown faster than her balance sheet. Every family dinner became a lecture about business acumen. "You have to understand the hospitality industry," she'd explain while I ate my salmon. "It's not just about providing rooms. It's about creating experiences, building brand loyalty, understanding luxury consumer psychology." I'd nod politely while internally reviewing the quarterly reports that showed our customer retention was actually declining and our luxury positioning was becoming diluted by aggressive expansion. "Catherine wouldn't understand," she'd say to Diane and Beth. "She's not in the business world. She works from home in her pajamas." I wore business casual actually, but correcting her had stopped being worth the effort years ago. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago at Mom's annual charity gala. Harrison Hotels hosted it every December, a black-tie fundraiser for children's hospitals that was really more about Mom's social positioning than actual charity. I'd attended in a simple black dress from Nordstrom, my only jewelry a pair of pearl earrings. Diane had worn Valentino. Beth had worn Dior. Mom had worn a custom Vera Wang gown that probably cost more than my car. Catherine, Mom had exclaimed when I'd arrived, her voice too bright, too loud. You came. I wasn't sure you'd feel comfortable at this kind of event. I'm fine, Mom. Of course. We'll try to mingle. Though I know networking isn't really your strong suit. She'd patted my arm and drifted away to greet a state senator. I'd spent the cocktail hour listening to hotel executives discuss expansion strategies I'd already approved, marketing campaigns I'd already funded, and operational improvements I'd already mandated. All while they walked past me without a second glance. Then came dinner. Mom had insisted on a family table at the front of the ballroom. Me, my sisters, their husbands, and Mom's CFO Richard Sterling. The table arrangement made it clear I was there out of obligation, seated at the far end next to Richard, who'd spent the first course checking his phone. The Atlantic City property is performing beyond projections, Diane had announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. 23% above forecast. Excellent work, Mom had praised. That's the Harrison standard. Excellence, always excellence. Beth had jumped in. The Miami renovation is coming in under budget. We'll have those suites ready for peak season. Brilliant, Mom had beamed. You girls understand what it takes to run a luxury operation. I'd eaten my salad quietly. Catherine, Mom had said, turning to me with that particular smile that meant criticism was coming. How's your computer work? Still working from home? Yes. I'm doing systems architecture for a fintech company right now. Fintech, she'd repeated as if tasting something unpleasant. That's like apps and things? Financial software infrastructure. Back-end systems for... Right. Very technical, I'm sure. Though I have to say I worry about you. Working alone in that little house, no real career progression, no team to manage. Don't you get lonely? I'm fine, Mom. It's just so different from your sisters, she'd continued, her voice dripping with false concern. They're building careers, managing teams, making real impact. You're just coding. In your pajamas. Business casual, actually. Whatever you wear, dear. The point is you chose a very small life. And that's okay. Not everyone is cut out for leadership. Some people prefer to work behind the scenes in supporting roles. Nothing wrong with that. Diane had smirked into her wine glass. Beth had nodded sympathetically as if I needed comfort for my tragic career choices. I worry you don't understand what real business looks like, Mom had pressed on. You've never managed a P&L, never overseen operations, never had to make decisions that affect hundreds of employees. It's a different world from writing code in your spare bedroom. Mom, I understand business just fine. Do you though? She'd leaned forward, her voice taking on that lecturing tone. Business isn't about technical skills. It's about vision, leadership, risk management. It's about understanding markets, reading trends, making strategic decisions under pressure. You're too poor to understand business at the level we operate. The table had gone quiet. Too poor. She'd actually said it. I'm not poor, I'd said carefully. Oh, Catherine, I didn't mean it like that. You make a decent living, I'm sure. But compared to what your sisters earn, what the company generates, what real business operations look like, you're operating at a completely different scale. You wouldn't understand the complexity of managing a $500 million hospitality empire. Stick to your day job, Diane had added, smiling. Leave the business strategy to people who actually run businesses. I'd set down my fork and reached for my water glass. My phone had buzzed in my clutch. A message from Robert Chin. The preview read, Catherine, we need to discuss Harrison Hotel's board situation. Several concerning decisions being pushed through without proper analysis. As majority shareholder, you may want to intervene. I'd stared at the message, thinking about 8 years of being dismissed. 8 years of family dinners where my career was a punchline. 8 years of watching my mother build an empire on leverage and debt while lecturing me about business acumen. 8 years of being the failure. While I'd secretly owned controlling interest in her company for 2 years. Catherine, Mom had said, noticing my distraction. Are we boring you with business talk? I'd looked up at her. At Diane's smug expression. At Beth's pitying smile. At Richard, the CFO, who was checking his phone with bored efficiency. Actually, I'd said quietly, I need to make a call. Business matter. Mom had laughed. Business matter? Catherine, we're at a charity gala. I'm sure your computer thing can wait. It's not a computer thing, I'd said, standing up. It's a shareholder matter. Excuse me. I'd walked to the hallway outside the ballroom and called Robert. Robert, it's Catherine. What's happening? Your mother's pushing an acquisition through the board. A hotel chain in the Midwest. 6 properties, combined value of $120 million. She wants to leverage the company's credit lines and some equity raises to fund it. And the target company is overvalued, underperforming, and located in markets we don't understand. The debt load would put Harrison Hotels at serious risk. It's a vanity acquisition, Catherine. She wants to hit 25 properties before the next Forbes profile. I'd closed my eyes, thinking about Mom's constant expansion. Always bigger, always more, always chasing headlines instead of sustainable growth. What's the board vote timeline? Emergency meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. She's got her board allies lined up. With her 32% and her voting bloc, she'll get it pushed through. Unless the majority shareholder objects. Unless that, yes. But Catherine, if you object, you'll have to reveal yourself. Your mother will know you own the company. I'd thought about 8 years of dismissal. 8 years of being told I was too small, too poor, too simple to understand real business. 8 years of watching my mother make increasingly risky decisions while patronizing me about business acumen. Schedule an emergency shareholder meeting, I'd said. Tonight. No. Invoke my rights as majority shareholder to call immediate board assembly for review of pending acquisitions. Catherine, it's 9 p.m. on a Saturday. During your mother's charity gala. Now, Robert. Send the formal notice. Every board member, every executive. We're having this conversation tonight while everyone's already in the building. There'd been a pause. You're sure? Send it. I'd walked back to the table and sat down. Mom had been in the middle of a story about negotiating with contractors, her voice animated, her hands gesturing dramatically. Richard's phone had buzzed. Then kept buzzing. He'd frowned, picked it up, and his expression had shifted from bored to shocked. Victoria, he'd interrupted. I just received a formal notice for an emergency shareholder meeting. Tonight. Right now, actually. Mom had stopped mid-sentence. What? That's impossible. Who called it? The majority shareholder. Someone named Cascade Holdings Group. We don't have a majority shareholder. The stock is distributed across dozens of entities. No one owns more than 12%. According to this notice, Cascade Holdings owns 61% of Harrison Luxury Hotels and is exercising their right to call emergency board assembly. All executives and board members are required to attend immediately. He'd looked around the ballroom. Most of the board is here at the gala. Mom's face had gone from confused to angry. This is ridiculous. This is my event. Someone's playing a prank or... Other phones had started buzzing around the room. Board members checking messages, executives looking confused. The lawyer for Harrison Hotels, Jacob Morrison, had approached the table, his expression grave. Victoria, I just received the same notice. It's legitimate. Cascade Holdings has properly documented their majority position. They have the right to call this meeting. We need to assemble the board now. Who the hell is Cascade Holdings? Mom had demanded. An investment entity. I'm looking up the corporate structure now, but it's complex. Multiple shell corporations, offshore vehicles. Whoever owns it went to great lengths to stay anonymous. Well, they can wait until Monday. I'm not interrupting my charity gala for some corporate raiders power play. Mom, I'd said quietly, you have to attend. It's legally required. She'd glared at me. Catherine, the adults are talking. This is actual business, not your little computer projects. I know it's actual business, I'd said. That's why I called the meeting. The table had gone silent. What? Mom's voice was sharp. I'm Cascade Holdings. I own 61% of Harrison Luxury Hotels. And I'm calling an emergency board meeting to discuss your acquisition proposal. Diane had laughed. That's not funny, Catherine. I'm not joking. Richard had been staring at his phone, scrolling through documents. The ownership records. They're showing through to a trust managed by Apex Capital Management. Listed as KM Harrison Trust. Catherine Marie Harrison, I'd supplied. That's me. Mom had stood up abruptly. This is absurd. You don't have the money to own a majority stake in my company. Do you have any idea what that would cost? Hundreds of millions. $187 million total, I'd said calmly. I've been acquiring shares for 2 years. Started with 3%, built to 61%. All documented, all legal. Robert Chin at Apex has been managing the purchases. You don't have $187 million, Diane had said flatly. You work from home as a contractor. You drive a Subaru. I have about $340 million currently. I started investing in cryptocurrency in 2013. I've done well. Beth had been staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're saying you're rich? Like actually rich. I'm saying I'm your mother's majority shareholder and I'm concerned about her decision-making. Specifically, this Midwest acquisition that's going to leverage the company into dangerous debt levels for vanity metrics. Mom's face had cycled through emotions. Disbelief, anger, confusion, and something that might have been fear. You can't just, this is my company. It's a publicly traded company where I own 61% of shares. That makes it partially mine. Mostly mine actually. Jacob had approached, lowering his voice. Victoria, if this is true, she has the right to block the acquisition. She has the right to remove board members. She has the right to replace executive leadership if she chooses. Replace? Mom had looked at me with something approaching panic. Catherine, you can't be serious. This is some kind of joke. Conference room B is empty, I'd said, standing up. Let's move this conversation there. Board members only. I'd looked at Diane and Beth. You two aren't on the board, so you'll need to wait here. This is insane, Diane had hissed. This is business, I'd corrected. Real business. The kind that happens when you own controlling interest in a $500 million company. I'd walked toward the conference room, not looking back. Behind me, I'd heard Richard telling other board members what was happening, heard the confused murmurs, heard Mom's heels clicking rapidly as she'd hurried to follow. The conference room had filled quickly. 7 board members, Mom, Richard, Jacob the lawyer, and Robert Chin, who'd apparently been waiting in the hotel lobby for my call. I'd sat at the head of the table. Mom had stood, refusing to sit, her arms crossed. Catherine, I don't know what you think you're doing. I'm exercising my rights as majority shareholder, I'd said calmly. Robert, can you display the ownership documentation? Robert had connected his laptop to the room's display screen. Corporate filings appeared. Cascade Holdings ownership structure. KM Harrison Trust documentation. Share purchase records going back 2 years. Current holdings. 61.3% of Harrison Luxury Hotels. One of the board members, Martha Simmons, had whistled softly. That's a controlling position. Yes, I'd agreed. Which means I can block any major decision including acquisitions. Which brings us to the Midwest hotel chain purchase. That acquisition is essential for our growth strategy, Mom had said tightly. We need to reach 25 properties to compete nationally. We need to reach profitability margins above 12% before we take on more debt, I'd countered. Our current margin is 9.3%. The Midwest acquisition will drop it to 6.1% and increase our debt-to-equity ratio to dangerous levels. Richard had been staring at his laptop. How do you know our exact margins? I've been receiving quarterly reports for 2 years. As majority shareholder, I've read every financial statement, every operational review, every strategic plan. I know this company better than you think. You've been spying on us, Mom had accused. I've been reviewing reports that I'm legally entitled to as an investor, I'd corrected. Reports that show concerning patterns. Aggressive expansion funded by increasing debt. Marketing spend up 40% with customer retention down 8%. Occupancy rates declining across our legacy properties while we open new ones. You're building an empire on leverage, Mom, and it's becoming unstable. Jacob had leaned forward. Miss Harrison, Catherine, what are your intentions here? Are you planning to take control of the company? Replace management? I'm planning to stop a bad acquisition, I'd said. The Midwest chain is overvalued at $120 million. 3 of the 6 properties are losing money. 2 are in markets with declining populations. The whole thing is structured to make our property count look impressive while destroying our financial health. That's not true, Mom had insisted. I've done extensive due diligence. Have you? I'd pulled up a document on my tablet. Because I had independent analysts review the target company. Their assessment is that it's worth $73 million maximum, and even that's generous. You're proposing we overpay by $47 million for assets that will cost us another $25 million in renovation and operational improvements. That's $72 million we could use for debt reduction, operational efficiency, or actually improving our existing properties. Richard had gone pale. I haven't seen that analysis. Because Mom didn't commission it. She fell in love with the headline, Harrison Hotels expands to 25 properties, without doing the math. I built this company from nothing, Mom had said, her voice shaking with anger. I turned one property into 17. I created hundreds of jobs. I made this family wealthy. And you're going to lecture me about business decisions? Yes, I'd said simply. Because I own 61% of this company and I'm watching you drive it toward bankruptcy for Forbes headlines. I would never. Mom, your debt-to-equity ratio has increased 340% in 4 years. Your interest payments are eating 23% of revenue. You're one economic downturn away from serious trouble, and you want to add $120 million in acquisition debt? That's not vision. That's recklessness. Martha had spoken up. Catherine, what do you propose instead? I propose we pause all acquisitions for 18 months. Focus on operational excellence at existing properties. Reduce debt by $50 million through targeted asset sales, specifically the 2 underperforming properties in our portfolio. Improve margins to above 12% through efficiency initiatives. Then and only then consider strategic expansion with properties that actually make financial sense. That's a conservative strategy, another board member had observed. That's a sustainable strategy, I'd corrected. Conservative would be selling off half the portfolio. I'm proposing we stabilize and optimize before we expand. Mom had sunk into a chair, her confidence visibly cracking. You're really doing this? You're really going to block me? I'm really going to vote no on an acquisition that threatens the company's financial health, I'd said. Because unlike you, I don't need Harrison Hotels to validate my success. I already have success. This is just one investment in my portfolio, and I'm not going to watch it fail because of ego-driven expansion. Ego-driven. Mom's voice had risen. You called it yourself at dinner. You want to hit 25 properties. Not because it makes business sense, but because it sounds impressive. Because it makes you look like you're still growing, still relevant, still the hospitality visionary everyone writes about. But running a good company isn't about headlines, Mom. It's about sustainable value creation. Robert had pulled up another document. I should mention Catherine has offers to sell her stake. 3 private equity firms have approached Apex about acquiring Cascade Holdings' position. The highest offer is $243 million, a $56 million profit on her $187 million investment. The room had gone silent. You could sell? Richard had asked. I could sell tomorrow, I'd confirmed. Take my profit and walk away. Let the PE firm restructure the company however they want. They'd probably fire half the executive team, including Mom. That's typically how these things go. Mom had looked at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Fear. But I don't want to sell, I'd continued. I want to fix this. I want Harrison Hotels to be sustainable, profitable, and well-managed. I want my investment to grow responsibly. Which means blocking bad acquisitions and implementing better financial discipline. And my role? Mom had asked quietly. You stay as CEO. You're good at hospitality operations, brand positioning, and property management. You're just terrible at financial strategy and risk assessment. So Richard handles the finance decisions with my approval for anything over $10 million. You handle operations and customer experience. We play to our strengths. You're stripping my authority. I'm adding oversight to protect a $500 million company from excessive risk. That's what majority shareholders do. Jacob had been taking notes. This will require updated corporate governance documents, revised authorization limits, new board committee structures. Draft them, I'd said. And I want a full financial audit completed in 90 days. Independent firm comprehensive review. If we find other concerning patterns, we address them immediately. Agreed, Martha had said. Several other board members had nodded. Mom had been staring at the table, her carefully constructed image crumbling. The powerful CEO, the self-made success, the woman who'd built an empire, confronted by her failure daughter who actually owned that empire. "I called you too poor to understand business," she'd said finally, her voice hollow. "Tonight at dinner. You did. You own my company. You've owned it for 2 years. And I called you too poor to understand business." Yes. She'd closed her eyes. "I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot. You're a good operator who got caught up in growth metrics and lost sight of fundamentals. It happens. That's why companies have boards and major shareholders, for oversight." "How long have you had this kind of money?" "I crossed 8 figures at 28. 9 figures at 31. I'm at about $340 million currently." Diane had been hovering near the conference room door. I'd seen her through the glass watching. Beth beside her, both of them looking shell-shocked. "Your sisters," Mom had said, noticing my gaze. This is going to change everything." "It already has," I'd said. "You can't put this back in the box. Everyone's going to know that the family failure is actually the secret success. That the daughter working in pajamas actually owns the company. That your lectures about business acumen were directed at someone with a $340 million portfolio." "How do I fix this?" Mom had asked, and for the first time in my adult life she'd sounded uncertain. "You apologize," I'd said simply. "Not a corporate apology. A real one. You acknowledge you were wrong about me, about my career, about my intelligence and capability. And then you work with me instead of dismissing me." She'd nodded slowly. "The acquisition? Dead. I'm voting no. If you try to push it through anyway, I'll call a vote to remove you as CEO and install new leadership." "Clear. Clear. Good. Now let's go back to your gala and pretend this was a routine board meeting. We'll announce the governance changes on Monday. For tonight, smile and raise money for children's hospitals." We'd filed out of the conference room. The ballroom had gone quiet when we'd entered, every conversation stopping as people tried to read what had happened. Mom's face was composed but pale. Richard looked shaken. The board members dispersed to their tables, murmuring to their spouses. Diane and Beth had cornered me immediately. "What the hell just happened?" Diane had hissed. "People are saying you own the company?" "I own 61% of it," I'd confirmed. "I've been the majority shareholder for 2 years." "That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money." "I have about $340 million. Started with crypto investments in 2013, diversified into broader markets, built from there. I saw Harrison Hotel's stock as a good value play 2 years ago and started accumulating shares." Beth had been calculating. "Wait. If the company's worth $500 million and you own 61%, your stake alone is worth over $300 million. $305 million at current valuation, yes." "But you work from home," Diane had said, as if that proved I was lying. "You wear hoodies. You drive a Subaru." "Because I invest my money instead of spending it on luxury cars and designer clothes. Compounding returns require capital that isn't tied up in depreciating assets." "You sound like a finance textbook," Diane had said bitterly. "I sound like someone who understands how wealth actually works. Which, according to Mom, I'm too poor to comprehend." Beth had been staring at her phone. "Oh my God. It's already on Twitter. Someone at the gala posted about a secret shareholder reveal at Harrison Hotels. Financial reporters are picking it up." "Good," I'd said. "Transparency is healthy." My phone had buzzed with messages. News outlets requesting comment. Industry analysts asking about my intentions. Investment firms inquiring about advisory roles. Mom had approached, her posture stiff. "Catherine, we should present a united front. People are asking questions." "Then answer them honestly," I'd said. "Tell them your daughter is the majority shareholder and will be taking a more active role in company oversight. Tell them the Midwest acquisition is cancelled in favor of operational focus. Tell them Harrison Hotels is prioritizing financial stability over aggressive expansion. That makes me look weak. That makes you look responsible. There's a difference." She'd studied me for a long moment. "When did you become this person?" "I've always been this person, Mom. You just never bothered to look." The gala had continued, but the energy had shifted. Conversations at every table about the revelation. Diane and Beth huddling with their husbands, probably recalculating family dynamics. Board members watching me with new awareness. Mom forcing smiles while her world rearranged itself. I'd left early, driving my practical Subaru home to my small house, where I'd sat at my home office desk and reviewed the fallout. The Wall Street Journal had already posted, Harrison Hotel's majority shareholder revealed as CEO's daughter. Bloomberg followed with, mystery investor behind Harrison Hotels, Catherine Harrison's $300 million stake. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. I turned it off and opened my laptop instead. An email from Robert. Catherine, the board vote is unanimous. Governance changes approved. Financial audit scheduled. Also, you're getting more PE buyout offers. Up to $267 million now. I'd smiled slightly and typed back. Not selling. I'm going to fix this company and prove Mom wrong about one more thing. That I don't understand business. Turns out I understand it better than she does. The next family dinner was 2 weeks later. Christmas Eve, traditionally hosted at Mom's penthouse. I'd arrived in jeans and a sweater, carrying wine from Trader Joe's, while Diane pulled up in her Mercedes and Beth arrived in a company car. Mom had opened the door, her expression complicated. Catherine. Come in. The apartment was decorated immaculately as always. But the atmosphere was different. Tense. We'd settled in the living room, drinks distributed, no one quite meeting my eyes. Finally, Mom had spoken. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the corporate statement Jacob drafted, but an actual acknowledgement of how I've treated you. I'd waited. I underestimated you, she'd continued, her voice unsteady. For years. I dismissed your career, belittled your choices, and treated you like you were a failure because you didn't follow my path. I called you too poor to understand business while you own my company. I was cruel, dismissive, and completely wrong. Yes, I'd agreed. You were. I think. She'd paused. I think I needed you to be the failure. So I could be the success. So my story made sense. The self-made CEO who built everything from nothing. Having a daughter who was quietly more successful than me without any of the performance. It threatened that narrative. So you belittled me to protect your ego. She'd flinched. Yes. I did. And I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Diane had been staring at her wine glass. I was terrible to you too. The comments about your day job, the smirking, treating you like you were less than us. I'm sorry, Catherine. You've been more successful than any of us and we were too arrogant to see it. I'm sorry too, Beth had added quietly. I followed their lead. I should have thought for myself. I'd looked at the three of them, my mother and sisters, all of whom had spent years making me feel small while I quietly built something bigger than any of them had imagined. I accept your apologies, I'd said. But things are different now. I'm not the family failure anymore. I'm the majority shareholder of a $500 million company, and I have expectations about how that company is managed and how I'm treated. Understood, Mom had said. Completely understood. And Mom? That financial audit? It's going to find some issues. We both know it. When it does, we're fixing them. No ego, no defensiveness, just good business practices. She'd nodded. I'll cooperate fully. Good. We'd had dinner after that. The conversation was stilted at first, everyone adjusting to the new hierarchy. But gradually, it had normalized into something different. They'd asked real questions about my investment strategy, my portfolio management, my analysis of Harrison Hotel's market position. Not patronizing questions. Genuine ones. For the first time in my adult life, they'd listened to my answers like I knew what I was talking about. As now they knew I did. The financial audit had found exactly what I'd expected. Aggressive accounting practices, deferred maintenance being capitalized to inflate asset values, marketing expenses misclassified to improve EBITDA metrics. Nothing criminal but plenty concerning. We'd spent 6 months restructuring. Brought in a new CFO with actual financial discipline. Sold the 2 underperforming properties. Reduced debt by $53 million. Implemented operational improvements that increased margins from 9.3% to 11.7%. Harrison Hotels became smaller, leaner, and significantly more profitable. The stock price had increased 28%. My stake was now worth $391 million. And I'd proven something more valuable than any return on investment. That quiet competence beats loud performance. That understanding business isn't about luxury cars and power suits and Forbes profiles. It's about sustainable value creation, disciplined decision-making, and knowing when to say no to bad deals. Mom had learned that lesson the expensive way. But she'd learned it. At the company's annual meeting last month, she'd stood at the podium and announced the year's results. Strong performance, improved margins, sustainable growth trajectory. This success, she'd said, looking directly at me in the audience, is due in large part to the guidance and oversight of our majority shareholder, my daughter Catherine Harrison. Her financial acumen and strategic thinking have transformed this company's trajectory. The room had applauded. I'd stayed seated, wearing jeans and a blazer, no designer labels, no luxury accessories. Just me, the woman who'd turned $100,000 into $340 million while everyone dismissed her as a failure. After the meeting, a reporter from Forbes had approached me. "Ms. Harrison, there's interest in profiling your investment journey. Self-made fortune, successful tech investments, now a major player in hospitality." "No thank you," I'd said politely. "I prefer to work quietly." "But your story is remarkable." "My story is mine," I'd interrupted. "I don't need Forbes to validate it." I'd walked out to my Subaru, driven home to my small house, and sat at my home office desk reviewing quarterly reports. My phone had buzzed. A text from Mom. "Thank you. For everything. For saving the company. For being patient with me. For being better than I deserved." I typed back, "You're welcome. See you at Sunday dinner." Because that was the thing about family. Even when they failed you, even when they dismissed you, even when they called you too poor to understand business while you owned their empire. Sometimes, if they could learn, if they could change, if they could finally see you for who you actually were, you gave them another chance. Not because they deserved it, but because you were big enough to give it anyway. And that, more than any portfolio value or company ownership or investment return, was the real measure of success.